What is the nature of the relationship between the world and us achieving our success? Is the world set up 100% against us? And if we want to achieve any success, have any results in this life, we will need to fight tooth and nail against all the resistance, all the people, all the situations that just want to hold us back in this world? Or is it one where the entire world is actually set up for us, where it's set up in a way that will help us? People, situations, circumstances, if only we will go out there and grab a hold of it. Or is it completely luck and there's nothing that we can do to either have more success or to have failures? It's 100% luck, and no matter what we do, our outcome is already predetermined because, hey, in the end, it's all just luck. Now, apart from the truth of this situation, the real question is, does it actually matter how we view the world? Because let's say it is one or the other, that relationship between the world and us achieving our results. Let's say it's one way or the other, but we view it differently and we act as if it's one or the other. Will that actually make a difference? This is where the windows and mirrors quadrant comes in, because this is a framework that we can use to view the world, and it will actually change the results that we get and the amount of success we are able to achieve in our lives. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, so we are going to take a look at the windows and mirrors quadrant. Now, if you have ever heard of the windows and mirrors story before, then you'll recognize right away there's no quadrant. So typically the framework goes like this. There are windows and mirrors in life, and some people look out the window whenever something bad happens to them. And that represents looking at the world and blaming the world and saying, man, I wish the world would not have done this to me. But then every time they do something good, wherever they achieve success or something great happens to them, they look in the mirror and they look at themselves and say, man, I'm so great. I'm glad I was able to do this. In contrast to that, some people take the opposite approach. They look out the window every time something good happens and they feel so grateful for what the world has done. And then every time something bad happens, they look in the mirror and they say, what did I do to cause this to happen, and make sure I don't do this again in the future. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, really going deep into this, because those aren't the only two options. So I want to present to you this quadrant here because there's actually 4 ways that you can approach the world here. So up on top here, we are going to show the things when something bad happens to you. And then on the left side of the quadrant, we're going to look at when something good happens to you. Now, M is for mirrors, W is for windows, W is for windows, M is for mirrors. Okay, so there are 4 different ways that we can approach looking at the world when something good or bad happens to us. Number 1, we can be in this first box. And I call this first box, if you are in here, you are the resentful handicap. Now, I chose these titles for these boxes on purpose because they're slightly offensive, and not because I'm trying to be offensive just for the sake of being offensive or for anybody. I'm not talking about physical handicaps here. I'm talking about, hey, this is the nature of reality, what I need to look at for myself, and understanding that if I approach life this way, this is going to be my result. So if we look at when something bad happens to us in this first quadrant, when we look out the window. So when something bad happens to us, we look out the window. We are going to look at the world and say, man, I am so upset at politics right now, at what the current administration is doing. They're making it so much harder for me to live the way I want, for me to be able to afford the things that I want, for me to be able to do business the way I want, for me to be able to whatever. You fill in the blank. You look out at the world. You look out at your family, at your friends, at the way you are raised, at your circumstances, your situation in life, whenever something bad happens, and blame the world. The first thing that's going to happen is you are going to become resentful to the world. Resentful, you will build up contempt for those around you that have done things that have held you back. Now, there's no personal responsibility in this. And this is the major flaw with looking out the window when something bad happens to you. because you never examine anything that you did in order to cause that to happen. Conversely, when something good happens to you in quadrant 1, you look in the mirror. Now, number 1, there's an element of arrogance to this. But number 2, you're going to be handicapped because you are going to be only looking at what you've done to get ahead. So you won't notice the opportunities that have presented themselves to you from the outside. And there are quite a few opportunities in life that present themselves to you from the outside. And if you think that you yourself are the only source of success, that means you are going to have blindfolds on that will prevent you from seeing those other potential areas of success from the outside, especially because the only time you look out the window at the world, you are looking at things that are bad happening to you. So anytime an opportunity does present itself to you in the real world, your automatic response will be, that's something that's coming to get me. That's out to get me. And so you're a resentful handicap in this quadrant because you are not going to be able to take advantage of all of the good things the world has to offer you, which there are a lot. Now, I want to pause here and give a disclaimer. The natural response here, as I'm going through this quadrant, is to think of all the other people in your life that fit into these quadrants. And I really, really want to emphasize here, this is a tool to use personally for individual success and habit changes and achieving better results in your life. Again, and I know this because I know me, right? So my number one response when I look at this is I think of people, I say, oh, I know this person that fits into this box, and I know this person that fits into this box. That's the wrong approach. There's no usefulness in that approach. There's nothing good that can come out of just categorizing and judging everybody that you know. This is a tool to look inside and say, what areas of my life am I doing this in, and how can I shift around to the correct quadrants here? Okay, I redrew it for you. Quadrant 2, moving down to quadrant 2, I call that the useless victim. The useless victim, again, we're looking out at the window whenever something bad happens and the window whenever something good happens. This is the person that views life as 100% luck, and no matter what happens in life to them, whether it's good or bad, they just thank their lucky stars when something good happens, or they blame the world and build up that same sort of resentment because they just happened to lose the lottery of life, of where you're born or who you were born to. And I call this the useless victim because at least in quadrant 1, you're taking some responsibility, even though it's just for success, and you're trying to do things to succeed. You're going to make progress. You're going to have results. This way, if you think the only way something good can happen to you is if somebody else gives it to you, you're useless. You're not going to perform. You're not going to produce. You're only going to consume. You'll create as little value for the world as possible because you don't believe that's actually something that you can do. Everything in life is just luck, and the pie is distributed randomly or not randomly, but the pie is distributed outside of your control, and there's nothing you can do to make your life better or worse. This is useless because you're not going to be producing anything for anybody else, but you're also a victim because whenever something bad happens to you, you're blaming the world, and you're not taking responsibility for it to make it better next time. It's just, well, that was luck of the draw. And so this is a useless victim. And I view this quadrant as probably the most dangerous quadrant to land in, the worst one, the one to avoid at all costs. We don't want to be a useless victim. At the very least, we want to be able to produce for the world. So moving from quadrant 2, we're going to go into quadrant 3, and this is where we start to get into the good side. Where I'd like to be most often. But quadrant 3, I call the Compentent Isolationist, and I'm going to be writing outside the lines there. So this is the Compentent Isolationist. So we look in the mirror when something bad happens to us. So we take responsibility for what bad happened to us, right? We're saying, hey, this thing happened. I didn't get the results that I wanted. I lost money here. I didn't make as much money as I wanted to there. This happened with my relationship, whatever. We're always looking in at ourselves and saying, that was my fault. I'm going to do better next time. We also look in the mirror when something good happens and say, hey, I did this, I did that, and so now I know I can do that more often to achieve better results in the future, and I am very glad that I did that. Now, I call this competent because you're going to be producing a lot, right? You're going to be fixing your mistakes, you're going to be taking responsibility, you're going to be moving up in the world. You're not going to blame anything on anybody else. You take responsibility, kind of the buck stops here attitude, extreme ownership, that sort of thing. And so you're going to have a lot of competence. The danger here is you're going to have a ton of arrogance because you don't look at the rest of the world as having any bearing on you whatsoever. So you're going to develop an extreme sense of arrogance saying like, it's all up to me, whether I succeed or whether I fail, it's all going to be up to me. So sometimes you're going to have that massive pile of arrogance that's going to hurt you. Arrogance is not something that helps you long-term. That's a hindrance long-term. On the other side of pride, we've got arrogance on one side and self-deprecation on the other. Those are both forms of pride. They are different expressions of pride. So arrogance is saying I'm the best. Self-deprecation is saying I'm the worst. They're both forms of pride because you're just looking internally. That's what pride is, thinking of yourself instead of everybody else. So self-deprecation is going to hold you back. When something bad happens, you're going to say, I did this. I'm the worst. It was all because of me, everything that I did. And so that self-deprecation is going to come in and again, it's going to hold you back. And then finally, I call it an isolationist because you're just like in the first quadrant, you're going to be missing all of the opportunities that the world is trying to send your way to help you out, which there are a lot of them. And so you're going to be missing out on that, looking only inward. You have your blinders on. You're going to achieve results as the best of the three quadrants so far, but definitely far from ideal. You'll build up a large amount of arrogance. And then lastly, the best quadrant here, the one that I like to stay in as much as possible, is going to be quadrant 4, where you look in the mirror every time something bad happens and you look out the window whenever something good happens. Now, the reason why this is going to be the ideal quadrant to land in as much as possible is because, number one, you've got the self-correcting feedback mechanism built in. Whenever something bad happens, many times it is going to be something that is your fault. If it wasn't your fault, that doesn't mean you can't take responsibility for it and say, what did I do to accidentally put myself in that situation that I can make sure I avoid in the future so that I'm not subject to that in the future, even though it wasn't my fault. And so you're taking responsibility for things that are outside of your control that happen, that are bad things that happen to you. That way you get that feedback mechanism in place to propel you forward and avoid those mistakes. But you're also optimistic because you don't have those blinders on. You're looking out at the world and saying, man, every time I do this, lots of good things happen to me that they just landed in my lap. Whenever I go out to a conference, I meet people and those people teach me different things or invite me to certain things, or I get new relationships that expose me to new things. These are all things, there's all little Easter eggs of luck that are just planted out in the world, in the universe, that are just waiting to be unearthed. Now, yes, I did a little bit of unearthing there, but for the most part, they were already there. I didn't do anything to make those happen. And so my eyes are always open with the attitude of what is out there that can help me succeed, because there's a lot of good out there. And so I'm constantly open. And when it does happen, it's like, man, I feel so grateful. I feel so thankful. I feel so lucky that that happened to me because it propelled me forward and gave me success. There was very little of that leap that had to do with me other than the fact that I kind of stumbled upon that luck that was out there. And so you've got the feedback mechanism in place for correcting mistakes so that you don't have that downside, but you also have the blinders off. So you're looking for all of the amazing opportunities that are out there. And that's why I believe that this fourth quadrant is the best one to stay in and retrain your brain, force your brain into looking at the world this way, because the fact of the matter is there is a lot of luck out there. If you look at the math, you look at the statistics, you look at the people who succeed and don't succeed, a lot of it has to do with luck, right? When you just look at some of the richest people in the world, you look at Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, you look at the fact that they were all born right around the same exact time. They had access to computers before most other people did, and they spent a lot of time on those computers versus everybody else. Well, it only makes sense that by the time that it was necessary to know how to code and know how to use computers really well, they were at the right age to be starting businesses. So there's a lot of luck out there, but they weren't the only ones, right? It's not like those were Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates were the only two who had experience or had expertise in those areas. It's not like they were the only two. So that luck was out there for a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, and a couple people took advantage of it. So that luck is out there. There is a lot of luck, but we also have to have the responsibility to error correct. And so we're not getting resentful towards the world. We're not self-deprecating. We're not getting arrogant. We're not isolating ourselves from the world. We're not viewing ourselves as a victim. We're correcting our mistakes and constantly looking out for all the opportunities that are presenting themselves. So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. And it is something that is a struggle for me, right? I think the natural response is not to be in this fourth quadrant. The natural brain response is to try and find somebody else to blame. It feels good to be angry. It feels good to have contempt or resentment. And so it's something that is a constant practice where you have to force yourself when a thought pops in your head, when you have success or failure, thought pops in your head, to retrain yourself and say, no, I'm not going to think that way. I'm going to think this way. And this framework contributes a lot toward continued and higher levels of success. Hopefully this is helpful for you. Let me know if you like it in the comments section below, or if you completely disagree and maybe there's something outside of these four quadrants here that you think is a better framework to view life through. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.